Hi, my name is Zach.
I'm Hunter.
This is the first episode of the best guess. This is our podcast on the channel, and overall, the channel is going to be gaming, streaming, podcasts, just entertainment from our perspective. And the podcast, which we're going to be kicking off our channel with, is going to be us talking about more sensitive topics that aren't really discussed in detail. And with that, we're going to be like I said, they're sensitive topics. So the first thing we're going to do is introduce ourselves and kind of our bias, like where we stand on things, just so you guys know where we're coming from whenever we talk about these topics.
Right on. Just get it off. Excuse me. To get it started off, my name is Hunter again. I am not very religious. I don't come from a very religious background. I grew up sort of tangentially going to church, not in any particular fashion, regularly at least. I lean quite left, usually, though I do try to listen and decide which political stance I'm taking at the moment on many, many different topics. So, in some cases, I'm extremely left. In some cases, I'm very right. In some cases, I'm socialist. Who knows? Um, a lot of my political background comes more from personal decision than it does, say, family or people who are around me influencing me. I have friends on both sides of the bipartisanship, and some who are outside of that bell curve. Overall, I think my personal philosophy is rather nihilistic. I'm sarcastic. I generally try to keep a an analytical wall between myself and my emotions so that I can make more reasoning decisions than less emotional decisions. I don't I like to hear entire parts of the argument before I continue forward with any decision that I make. And overall, I don't really have any current life goals that are outstanding. Nothing, nothing really worth mentioning. I like to take things as they come. It's my general disposition on everything is just to roll with it and make the best of it that I can. And what about you, Zach?
And like I said, we want to talk about issues from both standpoints. So me and Hunter have a lot of different viewpoints. So like you started off saying about religion, I'm very religious. Not necessarily in like the organized sense of one specific thing. I do lean more towards Judeo-Christian. Just I really don't know which one. I grew up Christian, so I grew
There
up
you go.
going to church. I bought in. I buy into a lot of Christian philosophy, and that's kind of it influences me a little bit, but I do I like religion. I like it, but I also have a little bit more of an analytical mindset, and with that, there are just some things that I feel like religion and science are kind of like they kind of go together. It's more of a poetic view of the world versus a more data driven view of the world, and with that, politically I lean very right. I would consider myself a far right anarchist. Uh, it's not very, uh, you know, politically correct, so to speak, but that's and like that's this is why we're talking about this is because we do want to get our biases out right away, and then my more broad philosophy on things is I like philosophy in general. In fact, even when I talk about religion, I kind of view philosophy and religion as not interchangeable, but definitely they they coincide a lot. They it's really just kind of viewing the reality that we live in and thinking about it and having a viewpoint on how to process everything that we see because there's so much reality and it gets hard for people to talk about it even like these issues right now. This is kind of why we don't like labels is because we're trying to take all these nuanced opinions and beliefs and cram them into labels. Like
Right.
some that we don't entirely agree with. It's just that's the best name we have for it. And whenever you try to talk about things like this and get more of a understanding of it, people kind of shut you down.
That's very true. Yeah, we definitely don't uh, adhere to labels very often. We use them because contextually that's the only way to describe some, philosophies, instances of perspective. But overall, we believe that most labels are way more fluid than people allow them to be. A lot of people will attach themselves to labels without fully understanding what they mean, or without the understanding of what that leads to or how that makes them who they are. We believe that a lot of these more negative labels can be looked at from different perspectives. Not to say that we agree with the label itself. A lot of our podcasts are going to be talking about really sensitive subjects, some things that may be offensive, some things that may be a little bit,
Taboo.
yeah, sort of taboo.
Not really socially acceptable. And the whole thing about these being sensitive topics and people not really wanting to talk about them is because people don't like talking about them, like you said, they kind of just don a label or an ideology, and then they're very, very rigid in it. They say, no, I believe in this, I don't want to think about any other thing, because in reality most people don't have time to think about this type of stuff, because there's multiple angles to every single belief, every single action, really. And I guess I'll go back to my philosophy a little bit. The best way I could describe my philosophy is kind of like of the Honda Civic or the AK-47 is just very cheap, just works every single time, not fancy. I'm very straight and to the point. I don't like really, really complicated things. I think people make things more complicated than they need to be.
I agree with that. And the overall idea is kind of to get to that base level of understanding of these things. That's why we wanted to make a podcast where we delve deeply into singular subjects at a time, learn as much as possible about them, discuss that
from different perspectives.
Of course. Overall, the podcast goal is to not only educate you guys, but also educate ourselves on various very specific topics, get into detail about them, which is why we felt it prevalent to give you a warning about this podcast's content. It may be slightly offensive, it may say things that you don't agree with, and that's okay. You're welcome not to not agree with them, of course, but for the most part we're doing that as an objective viewpoint to try and understand the topic better.
It keeps us honest. When
Exactly.
we're able to talk with each other and we have such differing viewpoints, we can check each other on. Like we said, we're both kind of analytical. We're more just the facts, really. We want to know. We want to get to the bottom of things. So whenever we talk about these things, there is a certain level of objectivity where we both have to accept the reality at hand and then move forward from there. How we view or how each one of our views on how to move forward from a given topic or
right, or how to analyze it overall,
right,
how to understand it better. So that's the goal of the podcast. Let's take a step back real quick and talk about the goal of the channel overall, because we've sort of mentioned that we're trying to create an entertainment channel, but I think it's a good segue into that for a second. We created Sockjar 2, put up basically whatever entertainment content that we deem is acceptable there. Whether that's gaming or podcasts or streaming, or he mentioned animation at one point. Right now, the overall goal of the channel itself is to put up content, things that we like to do, that we're exploring, that we're interested in. Really for the hell of it, honestly,
right,
for the fun, to get our name out there, to create stuff.
Right, and that's the larger channel, and then this podcast is where we get into the specific ideas.
Right. This will definitely be a lot more dry than I believe the other
Right.
stuff will be.
Yeah.
Some of the other stuff may be somewhat technical, but this will definitely be more dry. Maybe a sarcastic comment here and there, I'm sure, but um, I think the topics on this will be
So
hopefully more educational than the other content.
So since this is the first episode and we're getting into introducing each other, let's kind of talk more about what those labels we brought up earlier mean. So like, when you bring up your philosophy about being a little bit more left and maybe
Right.
being a-religious, what does that mean for you?
So when I say left, I usually mean probably closer to centrist Democrat than is currently popular of a belief, I guess, about the
Mhm.
left. I'm not a socialist by any means. I do believe that social programs are, can be beneficial when run correctly, but overall I'm fairly straightforward centrist left. Um, I disagree with the current centrist point of view in America. I don't really believe that they're making any progress, any traction. I think that there needs to be an overhaul overall of the current left standing. As for, I'm sorry, what was the second part you said? A-religious. I've always enjoyed religious ideologies. I've always explored different religions because I find their philosophies, their tenets to be interesting to me. Especially the way that some people live much more strictly by them versus others and still have the same belief. We have a lot of conversations that are based around religion. I'm not by any means the common internet atheist. I don't hate religion. I don't even dislike organized religion as long as it's, benevolent by nature. It's not something that I particularly hate. So I try to avoid the label of atheist, and that's a good example of why labels can be so dangerous, is because if I say I'm an atheist, then people immediately think, oh, he hates organized religion. All religious people are idiots to this guy. We should just avoid that topic, and he's just closed-minded. And that's not who I am at all. So I avoid that religion. I just say I'm non-religious. I prefer it that way, and I'm not particularly spiritual in any facet either. So I think that's included in there. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite a believer of anything.
Right. Like you brought up nihilism, so So I guess when I asked that, you're talking about more, you kind of view just like what do you like? You talk about like social programs or just the government in general. Where do you have any like specific ideology, like an overall like view on like what? So when you say we need an overhaul of centrism, what do you think would help with that?
Oh, I think there needs to be a lot of more interdiscussion between both sides of the party to determine, what socialist programs are benefiting, what can we cut and remove,
Mm-hmm.
and what can we reallocate to make sure that these things are working. Say, Social Security or Medicare, or even something as I guess social blankety as cutting off taxes, below the poverty line. Just don't tax people below the poverty line.
Mm-hmm.
Things along that nature. I don't fully believe one side or the other has the right answers. There are actual social issues that I believe politics should tackle, but otherwise I think politics should actually be fairly congruous in what they're doing, speaking about within each other to the people about what we all think the nation should do going forward, not just well, I'm voting red because I like guns.
Right. And
I don't-
and I'm glad you brought that up of just it should be more like together, and because it should. The government works for us. It's not, we don't work for the government. They're supposed to be there for us, especially in their current view of things is they're supposed to be helping us out, the average citizen. And that's something that bugs me about people not really knowing their positions on things is it leaves a lot of that open to just government corruption, really. People who just take advantage of the system. And so for me, like when I say that I'm more right, I'm much more smaller government type guy. Like I said, I'm an anarchist. I would prefer there, no, in a perfect world, no government. But
In a perfect world.
right, we obviously don't live there. So my political viewpoints are more like Adam Smith, laissez-faire, capitalism, of just let the market handle things because
You're sort of a free trade guy as well, aren't you?
right, yes. Yeah, and that's it. Is just I feel like the most consensual, beneficial agreements we really have are what we're able to trade, and that is in terms of our labor, in terms of our time. Everything's value, and okay. So I'll bring up my religion.
I was just about to ask you that you said you're sort of you grew up Christian, but you have a bit of a different sort of view. Can you go ahead and expound upon what that means?
So I am religious, more in the Christian sense of I do believe in a God, a one God. I but that me growing up in that, I've learned a lot of biblical stories, learned a lot of the biblical philosophy, and kind of what I got out of it is there's a lot of moral lessons to be taken from the Bible and from religion in general that is more so just not simplification. It is kind of simplification. It's more like a poetic view of how we can take situations that happen in our life and work through them in the most beneficial way.
Right.
But outside of that, like when it comes to the more metaphysical stuff like heaven or the idea of like a tangible God, that's a little bit above my pay grade. I don't really know. I haven't met anyone who's died. I don't know enough about science or religion to say either way. But what I can say is I'm definitely here for the next 80 years. And most people are here for around that 80-year mark. So that time is pretty important. It's because that's all we know, really. And some people can say that, death is better. Like, okay,
Right,
like,
right.
yeah, I'd rather be dead than alive. And it's like, okay, well, I people say that, but then they're still here.
Of course.
And I think it's more like showing that there is something wrong in how we view how we live right now. Because we have that short amount of time, but most of that time is spent not loving each other, not being nice, not being civil. And it is really tough because you see there's war, there's poverty. And that's kind of my viewpoint of a lot of, especially like Christian philosophy, is there is all this hurt and pain in the world, and it's kind of our job to fix that.
Okay.
And some people in Christianity say like, oh, well, the most you can do is just try to get them to believe in a God or believe in Jesus, but that's not real tangible help. When you look at
Right.
like the philosophy of Jesus, he helped the poor, he helped the lepers, he helped the materially, yes, like actually, like he fed people with the one fish and the piece of bread, or I don't remember how much specific. It was not enough fish or bread to go around, but he made it work. And that's kind of the philosophy is we are here. Whether or not we believe we're going to heaven afterwards, whether or not we're going to hell afterwards, for the time that we are here, there's going to be a here after we're gone. Because unless, we live to see the rapture or whatever, but like the chances of that is
getting higher, apparently.
It's not my if the rapture happens, it's no longer my problem.
Yeah, that is one of those, well, somebody else's hands now.
Right, exactly. But for the time that is here, that I have control over my own body, my just what I can tangibly affect. Like you said, materially is how we should help people, and just
that's regardless of point of view. Like you should, as a person, take it upon yourself to help others.
Well, you can say that, but then if we want to talk more about philosophy, like even nihilistic philosophy, if this is all just material, if we're all just kind of meatballs floating in space that we're here randomly, you don't really have. There's no impetus on helping other people. There's no moral.
Well, I mean, that's a neutral zone. It's
Right.
whether or not you feel impelled to do so.
Right.
But speaking of materialism overall, we did touch on philosophy and religion
Mhm.
just now, but I wanted to go into technology, which is
Mhm.
really where technology and science are where I really thrive. He's very much more the philosophical, political person, and I've always been more science and technology. We find usually
Yeah.
fairly common ground on.
Yeah, no, I definitely like technology, and that's we have a lot of that's like when we talk about science, that's where a lot of our common viewpoints come from. Is even though we have these different political and philosophical viewpoints, we're able to. There's still the material, the things that do work, the very bottom building blocks
Right.
of our reality.
The essential things that make our society go forward.
Right.
And so I wanted to talk briefly about what our podcast may talk about in terms of technology, like futurism versus modernism versus,
Mhm.
the not esoteric, excuse me, the archaic
Mhm.
analog versions
Right.
of technology, what we believe in each of these things. I know you're a fan of analog technology specifically
Right.
because of not only the metaphor that it represents to you, but also
Mhm.
because it physically feels better to
Right,
you.
and yeah, I'll talk about the analog sort of meaning for me is like sound is a good representation of this. So like right now we're doing a podcast, it's all digital. Most podcasts now are digital. Most music, most sounds that you hear anywhere is all digital, which means all the sound that you're hearing is mostly artificial, like created from just electronics.
Right,
like,
electronics interpreting sound and
Right.
creating it into waves.
Right, and there's nothing wrong with that, but when you think about how we used to have to record sound in the sense of taking the sound waves that were being emitted from either instruments or singing and then just copying those basically through a tube, just those same sort of vibrations and waves, it that I guess that kind of connects with the AK-47 and the Honda
Right. The very simplistic
example. It's very simplistic,
effective.
right? And that's what I think we miss with a lot of modern technology is. I'm not saying modern technology is bad by any means. What I'm saying is because we're kind of separated from what the technology is supposed to be helping us do, we forget it's supposed to be helping us to do something. It's not technology to have in and of itself. And of course you can have it in and of itself, but
Right.
that's not the most beneficial
which
for
is
us.
which is sort of my point of view on things. I'm very much a futurist modernist. I like the idea that, time and technology, they both march forward. You buy a phone for a year, and a couple years later that phone is, outdated. There's one that's twice as good, 3 times as good, and I enjoy that
That-
concept that we move forward, not only technologically but semi-culturally as well, because it's very tied together.
That's actually a very good example because with like a phone, there's the phone which is meant to, like call. It's meant to
Transmit sound waves.
Right, exactly. We're able to talk to each other from different areas in the world. That's what technology is helping us to do. But then because of that sort of march forward with technology, we've gotten separated from the idea of human connection, of what we were doing in the first place, which was to talk to each other, to share ideas in person. But I guess we are separated, but it feels a lot more separated with technology like that. And it doesn't really have to be. Like, I see this a lot with just people in general. They feel very alone.
Right.
And I kind of feel like certain technologies like that kind of help, but just because we don't think about what's at the bottom of it, like what is supposed to be helping us do, which is to help us connect more as humans.
Okay. No, I agree with that. We'll have to touch on that probably another
Oh yeah,
another
no,
episode, just because that
Right.
is a really in-depth, with social media and technology itself and the progress that we've made overall as a society. I'd like to get back to what it means when we talk about other people's personal philosophies. So if we're talking about somebody who's, say, an optimist, just as an example, when when we talk about other people's philosophies, we generally, well, you and I generally we make fun. We have like a little satire going about, oh, communism or socialism or optimism or things that
Mm-hmm.
we can make jokes about. But in reality, we also do try to look at other people's perspectives as valid as possible, as
Right, as honest as
wholly
possible.
yeah, as honest as possible.
And-
And I think that it's important that we mention that even though we are saying these things about ourselves, these labels, when we talk about something from another person's perspective, let's say a religion neither of us are very familiar with, like Taoism,
Mhm.
things like that, we hopefully we will be able to do some research. We do have a computer in front of us, so in case we are completely lost, we will try to do some research before, if not during the podcast. I think really what I'd like to do these last few minutes wrapping up on is when we get to a subject that we don't know,
Mhm.
we're probably going to admit it. Both of us are openly able to admit that we don't understand
Right.
things, and we're openly able to absorb more information about that without bias, just trying to learn as much as we can before we start talking about it in ignorance, I guess, in complete
Right.
ignorance.
And that's exactly right. And when we're talking about people kind of donning ideologies or different viewpoints, when you don't know what it is that you're donning really, or what you're advocating for, it gets things happen that like maybe you don't actually support in reality. So if we are going to be talking about ideas, if there's a better idea out there that we just don't know about yet, but we're able to explore it honestly, I would rather explore it honestly and then get to the better idea than continue holding on to an older, less functional idea, I guess.
Agreed. And that's sort of what the original idea for this, I guess, talk show podcast was to
Mhm.
take, was to branch away from the shoot the shit podcasts and move into,
Right.
well, how do we learn about these things? Okay, well, we got to do it on our own. So let's,
And
make a podcast, take people along the ride with us. Let's
and we
see.
do, and we are running the risk of being unpopular for that, but that's kind of
Right. That's the content that we decided on because of
Right.
us, not because of the popularity.
Right.
I believe that when we are at our best, we're talking about absurdism or crazy ideas that make us laugh, and
right.
at the same time we bounce back and forth between, oh, okay, this is crazy, but what if we tweaked it like this to make this just a little closer to reality? And I think that's a good way to approach at least some subjects. Obviously not all of them,
Right, some of them you do need to take a little bit more seriously than
Right.
others, but for the most part, really that's the best thing you can do to just kind of get out of, like you're saying, to get out of that, like,
to branch out of your comfort zone.
right, is to just explore them honestly, to learn what each one is about, and
Even if it starts off as a joke or,
Right,
a bit.
and then again, the reason why you need to know what you believe is so that you can contend with those ideas. You can actually figure out which one is the better one, because
Right.
there is going to be a better one. Like and
Even
when
if that's, a meshing of
right,
one
different
ideas.
ideas. But and again, I'll bring up the Honda Civic and the AK philosophy again. Is I just want it to work. So I don't necessarily need to be right, which a lot of people are really focused on being right, like being I'm correct, you're wrong. I just want whatever we're talking about to work in the end for the most people.
No, I agree with that. And we do a good job of breaking away from I'm right, you're wrong. That's the end.
Although I am right and he's wrong.
I don't know how many holes I've poked in all of your stuff, but it's most of it, if not all of it. But all right, guys, we wanted to make this kind of a short episode today, so I think it's about time to wrap it up. Again, my name is Hunter.
I'm Zach.
If you enjoyed what you're listening to, make sure to subscribe. Leave a comment below if you think there's a subject that we need to talk about specifically.
Definitely, we're not adverse to any suggestions. We will talk about anything.
Absolutely, and we always love taking new perspectives. So the more perspectives we get, the more we get to chat about, and the more fun we get to have. Um, all right, guys, I think that's about time to wrap it up.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see you in the next one.
Bye, guys.